For fans of obscure Japanese games on the original PlayStation, here's some good news. There are still plenty of great overlooked titles that can be found in the current year for reasonable and affordable prices. But I've also got some bad news. Quite a few of the lesser known PS1 discs out there have suddenly begun to skyrocket in price in very little time, whether it's a hidden gem or a hidden turd, like this game. Just be aware that it looks like the era of cheap Japanese original PlayStation games is coming to a close. Unless it's an RPG, those are like the sports games of Japan and most will probably always be cheap. One PS1 title that surely falls into the hidden gem category but has been pretty pricey for a while now is the 1999 2D action platforming cult favorite The Adventure of Little Ralph, brought to us by the long-defunct New Corporation. It's a game that needs no introduction, especially here at Import Gaming for the win, since it was the subject of episode 13 back in 2014. No doubt the reason its value shot up so early in the big retro game boom is because Little Ralph really is a solid, fantastic game, one that sadly never got the attention it so warranted at the time of its release, lost in the vast sea of PlayStation titles that hit store shelves each month. Surely a shift in trends and tastes at the time, moving away from the retro style of the games Little Ralph paid homage to, played a part in this, as did some of the mediocre reviews it received upon release. Seriously, what professional reviewer gives this game a 4 out of 10? Maybe games journalism was always bad. But whatever the case, the game's lack of financial success doesn't seem to have come from a lack of marketing. Across Japan, posters and advertisements for The Adventure of Little Ralph were on display in video game retailers, which also distributed leaflets promoting the game's release. Additionally, while it wasn't previewed as much as some of the heavy hitters at the time like Final Fantasy VIII and the newly released Dreamcast, you could still find a bit of Little Ralph coverage in video game magazines back in '99. One of the most effective and popular ways to promote an upcoming game in the 32-bit era, however, was with playable game demos, so it's no surprise that a small portion of Little Ralph's big adventure was made available in trial form, multiple times at that. One of these was released in the February of 1999, included in both Sony's official Japanese PlayStation magazine, Hyper PlayStation RE-MIX, as well as the MediaWorks published Dengeki PlayStation D. This demo allowed players to experience the first of the game's 8 levels, from stage 1-1 in the city to stage 1-2 in the Waterworks Bureau, culminating in the boss fight with the area's caretaker, the wise, machine-loving Oval. Though this build of Little Ralph is close to what would be presented in the final game, it does vary from the finished product in a few ways. Some, but surely not all, are as follows. In the game's introduction, a few flying minions are present during the text crawl, and Ralph's reaction to losing Lutetia and being rendered a helpless child by dark magic is less animated. Backgrounds are different and not as detailed in the intro, but also in the starting town stage as well as the track mode's autoplay of stage 4. The arrangement of the heads-up display is different as well, featuring a high score value but omitting the stage number and timer, despite having a time limit. The gameplay tutorial is not quite as polished and complete, and the look and placements of many of the score and power-up items would also be altered before the final release. Honestly, they're all really minute differences, but for a fan of The Adventure of Little Ralph, it's kind of neat looking back and seeing them. In addition to providing the player with a raw gameplay experience, this demo promotes the retail release in a couple of clever ways, one with the name entries in the score rankings, and another with the post-fight dialogue between Ralph and Oval. The little hero questions the defeated old hag regarding the whereabouts of Lutetia, to which she replies that all will be known in March, followed by a playful dialogue and a screen advertising that the exhilarating ultimate action game The Adventure of Little Ralph would be out sometime in March of 1999 for the standard PS1 retail price of 5,800 yen. The dev team would work on the game for a few more months past that date, however, and it wouldn't be until June 3rd that Little Ralph would finally hit store shelves, with this delay also accompanied by a reduced MSRP of 4,800 yen. While it wasn't quite the bargain of something in D3's Simple series or Success's Super Light libraries, this price tag does make The Adventure of Little Ralph somewhat of a budget title, surprisingly. But perhaps more surprising than that, New Corporation would prepare even more demos in an attempt to hype up the game's release. One new trial version was distributed once again through Dengeki PlayStation D magazine in its May edition. This is an update of the previous demo, featuring more polished gameplay and graphics found in the final release, 2 selectable stages, and an options menu that allows players to choose between the standard soundtrack or the PSG sound mode that emulates the noises of the Sharp X68000, where The Adventure of Little Ralph was originally intended to call home. Similar to the other demo, character dialogue promotes the release of the retail game, with the Stage 2 boss, the Devil Kid Wiki, stating he'll let you off the hook until June. On May 21st, a standalone sampler disc was also distributed in limited numbers at retailers for customers interested in the game. This version also contained the updated graphical assets, but had none of the sound options found in the previous magazine demo and only granted access to Stage 1. However, this disc did bring a couple of new features to make up for that, the first of which is a score attack mode, where players start with only 1 life and aim to gain as much points as possible. Regardless of whether Ralph makes it through the level in one piece or not, finishing up this mode will provide a password for your score on the title screen, which you could send to New Corporation on a postcard to enter a contest. The finished game would have a similar competition, one which you could win a Sony Walkman, Sony Minidisc player, or even an Apple iMac, but the prizes were on an understandably lower scale for this demo's contest, including pocket stations according to this blurb in Weekly Famitsu. In addition to Score Attack, players could also enjoy the first of the Adventure of Little Ralph's fighting game style segments, playing as not-so-Little Ralph against the boss of Stage 4, the mutated lizard man Trevant. Like the other stages, post-fight dialogue is used as an opportunity to promote the game's street date. So as you can see, before June 3rd, 1999, there were plenty of opportunities for Japanese gamers to see, hear, and experience firsthand New Corporation's upcoming 2D action masterpiece. But can you believe it? There's one final thing to mention here, and it just happens to be the most interesting promotional item of the bunch. A special demo that is called Hero-kun to Ralph no Daibouken, or The Adventure of Ralph and Hero-kun. Okay. This demo differs from all of the others in several ways, which we'll get into, but the biggest and most obvious is the inclusion of the titular Hero-kun, who follows Ralph around as he hacks and slashes throughout the journey. But what in God's name is, who is this rather unique young individual who accompanies the protagonist here? This Hero-kun. Well, he's the star of a series of a manga of the same name, written and illustrated by Takahiro Kamiya. It began its run in 1994 and became popular when it was serialized in the pages of Monthly Comic BombBomb, which would later publish Hero-kun stories in book form with its BombBomb Comics label. You only need a quick peek at one panel in this manga to see it's for a younger demographic and is chock full of humor. Odd and at times grossly bizarre humor. Because this is about Little Ralph and not Hero-kun, I won't go too much into the character or his adventures, but he can be described as strange, lacking self-awareness, and clumsy, but he's got a pure heart of gold and is a loyal friend to the people in his life. And this is all made very apparent in the demo. But I guess the real question is, why is he in a Little Ralph demo? Well, the answer can be found by rewinding things just a little bit and taking another look at Monthly Comic BombBomb. A variety of manga series are published in this magazine, including adaptations from popular video games such as Rockman / Mega Man, Super Mario, and a personal favorite of mine, Ganbare Goemon. This made a lot of sense, as a huge portion of the young male audience the magazine targeted also loved video games, which is why information on new and upcoming game releases could also be found in Monthly Comic BombBomb's many pages. The popular magazine must have seemed like a natural platform for advertising a new PlayStation action platformer, so I assume that's the reason this Little Ralph and Hero-kun demo tie-in was born. Readers were able to request this disc through the mail and could also participate in a high-score competition, much like the standalone disc talked about earlier, the details of which could be found in the June 1999 edition of Monthly Comic BombBomb. Unfortunately, as these somewhat bulky magazines were often disposed of soon after reading, they are quite hard to come by today, and I was unable to obtain an issue of this particular magazine myself after searching for some time. Back to the disc itself. While it's missing the sound options and fighting game style boss battle included in the other demos, content-wise this is the beefiest one of them all, featuring the entirety of the game's first 3 levels playable in one go, from the streets of Cthulhu and the Waterworks Bureau in Stage 1, through the aqueducts and sewage plant of Stage 2, and ending in the desert with a showdown with the Gold Sphinx and the colossal Pyramid of Sphio. Hero-kun appears in the game's intro and joins from Stage 1, accompanying Ralph everywhere the little hero goes and functioning in the same way the sidekick power-up creature Fario does. Where the mysterious little creature aids Ralph's attacks with a small arcing explosive, Hero-kun uses his natural gifts to help by shooting out snot from his nose in a similar fashion. I think I mentioned he's kind of gross. The connection to the world of Hero-kun doesn't stop just with the main character himself, however, and you can find all of his friends hanging around the stages as power-ups, usually in hard-to-reach or secret areas. There's Body-Body-kun, Boro-Boro-kun, Muka-Muka-kun, this little caveman guy who I couldn't identify, Gero-Gero-kun, Pew-Pew-kun, Kira-Kira-chan, and in place of where the X68000 computer would be found in the final release is Hero-Boro-Borotto. Hero-boro-boroto. What the fuck? And in place of where the X68000 computer would be found in the final release is Hero-boro-boroto. I never want to say that ever again. Hero-kun is not a silent partner like Fario, and whenever there's dialogue, he butts in and brings some nice humor and a bit of awkwardness to the conversation. For example, when Ralph tells the Stage 2 boss Wiki that kids should go home and drink some milk, Hero-kun reminds the protagonist that he too is a child, at least in his current form. This causes Ralph to question which side Hero-kun is on, and Wiki asks what's up with a two-man comedy act. It's fun, it's playful, I like it. Additionally, the manga star's catchphrase, tottemo hero-hero, is spoken by all in the game window after completing stage 1 and 2. It's hard to express what this means in English. Kind of like it's hard to express what Hero-kun is about in any language, even Japanese. When Ralph and Hero-kun pass the trial of the Gold Sphinx in stage 3, they realize their time together has come to an end and the two must part ways. Before heading to the Lost Continent, Ralph thanks the odd boy for his help and companionship, and the demo concludes. The Adventure of Little Ralph with Hero-kun demo disc is a great collector's item, but it's actually not as rare as the other standalone demo disc mentioned, and as such is cheaper and easier to find. But out of all of the demos that were made for the game, it's the most fun, interesting, and collectible, for obvious reasons. While it never got the fanfare it so deserved back in 1999, The Adventure of Little Ralph is considered by many in the hardcore gaming crowd to be one of the best titles on the PlayStation, made with such devoted passion and craft by its very small development team. You can learn more about the team and their vision with the project in an interview translated over at the Shmuplation's website. It's a short but fascinating look into just how much pure passion they had making the game. But that all leads to a good question: whatever happened to New Corporation? Well, some say the stars that shine the brightest are the quickest to burn out, and I think that could be certainly applied here. Aside from Little Ralph, the company put out two other titles on Sony's 32-bit machine, the seminal early PS1 classic sports simulation Boxer's Road, and oddly, a fantastic port of Capcom's fantastic beat-em-up Captain Commando. Both of these were advertised with leaflets that came with the standalone discs. Aside from those, in 1997 they worked on a now extremely rare and expensive release of Gainax's Princess Maker for the X68000, and the last game to feature the new name was Hajime no Ippo Victorious Boxers for the PlayStation 2 in 2000. A few years later, the company's main staff members split ways to form three companies. Little Ralph designer Ryuta Aoyagi formed Grand Prix in 2003, going on to produce more Hajime no Ippo titles, but the studio went bankrupt in 2012. In 2002, producer and programmer Katsuyoshi Yamaki founded Think and Feel, which is still in operation today and has a working relationship with Square Enix. After New completely disbanded in 2004, former president Yasuyuki Narushima would keep the IP rights and assets to the company's original works and established Ertain, a company that put out many titles for handhelds in the mid and late 2000s, including a sequel to Boxer's Road for the PSP. Ertain would eventually fold in 2011, and currently all of New's old properties are owned by Collavier, who has a whole section dedicated to the Adventure of Little Ralph on their website, in Japanese as well as English. One final thing I want to bring up about Little Ralph is an anecdote I heard a couple of years ago from someone in the gaming industry regarding the creator of the game. It seems like eventually he found employment at Hudson, but when the Konami merger happened in 2012, he was one of the many staff members laid off. At the time I had that conversation, he was currently working as a cab driver in Chiba. I can't remember who this was specifically, but I have a pretty strong suspicion based on the Hudson thing. Anyway, it's just unfortunate, unless the man loves driving taxis more than making games. Who knows? Well, that's it for episode 2 of Demoing Demos. I hope you enjoyed it, whether you're a fan of The Adventure of Little Ralph or not, and hopefully you'll stick around for the next episode. This is Jimmy Hapa. Thanks and take care.